Crowder and Brooks being in a deal for each other would be Adams and Valanciunas all over again. I hate to tell you that.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
What's going on, NBA fanatics? This is your friendly neighborhood Memphis Grizzly homer, Memphis X, and I talk hoops. Today, we are going to talk about a scathing rant that Chris Vernon had regarding Dillon Brooks earlier this week. But first, every hero needs their theme music.
Piano.
Grizz gang, go hard. Baddest in the game, we be on one. I talk hoops, so secure. All up on the court, but we gon' score. Memphis bringing heat straight from Tennessee. Demarest like an Escobar.
So last week, we got the classic Chris Vernon Grizzlies rant. And it's been a while since we've heard one of these. He's usually pretty reserved on Grind City Media. It's been like since he's probably had his own show on the radio, on the regular radio, that we've got one of these rants about the Grizzlies. If everybody can remember his campaign on Pau Gasol, his campaign on Rudy Gay. And it seems that now Dillon Brooks is in his focus. So I'm going to play a few clips. And we're going to get into, and I'm going to get into whether Chris Vernon is correct or not about his evaluation of Dillon Brooks on the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, to give you some context of how this started, it was started with the report that Jae Crowder was available for trade, and Chris Vernon is a big fan of Jae Crowder. So he was eager to put him on the team, and that's how it started.
Who would you do, Danny Green?
What are you talking about?
I mean, if you're talking about a trade for Crowder, I mean, Danny Green would be who you're looking at.
Oh, I don't know what I don't know what they once had an interest in Dillon Brooks.
The Grizzlies aren't doing that. I knew you were going to go there, but they're not doing that. Like, let's be realistic about it. The Grizzlies are not going to do that. They're not going to trade Dillon Brooks for Jae Crowder. You know they're not going to do that.
No. I'm saying as a base.
So obviously it got started off harmless enough. It was just a suggestion. He was just saying that, if you guys remember the Brooks fiasco during the 3-team trade with Washington and Phoenix and Memphis with Chris Wallace still here, Phoenix Suns, I think it was a different GM, had an interest in Dillon Brooks. So Chris Vernon was just, saying, hey, they had a, interest in Dillon Brooks at one point, so maybe they will again. He wasn't suggesting a one-on-one trade. I'm pretty sure he would want a first-round pick back. And, Phoenix has already said that they don't value any first-round picks. So they might give you a first-round pick and maybe, maybe a second-round pick thrown in. Who knows? So it started off very harmless.
Crowder and Brooks being in a deal for each other would be Adams and Valanciunas all over again. I hate to tell you that.
Now, this is where I start to disagree with Vernon, because the difference between the JV and Adams deal and Crowder for Dillon deal is Adams does all the things that JV does except score, and instead of scoring, he's a passer. Crowder does none of the other things Dillon does, and he doesn't score. Now, he shoots three-pointers, but he doesn't make them. He's not efficient. He can't defend the guys that Dillon defends on a nightly basis. He definitely doesn't have the range of defense that Dillon has. He can't defend point guards up to power forwards like Dillon does. And he's not as good a defender as Dillon is. So he opens up a lot of holes with the Grizzlies, apart from just scoring the ball. When you had the JV for Adams deal, the only hole that Adams opened up for the Grizzlies was scoring the ball, and that was taken up by Desmond Bane. So, that's the difference in my eyes.
He shot 35% in the playoffs.
I'm with you there.
I'm sorry, folks. I know everybody watched him gun in Game 6 against Golden State and forgot everything else. He shot 35%.
Yeah, that's not good.
For the playoffs.
It's not good.
35 while taking the second most shots on the whole team. He took more shots than Desmond Bane. He took more shots than Jaren Jackson. He took more shots than Zaire Williams. He took more shots than name the player. Ja Morant's the only one. And Ja got hurt.
Yeah.
And then he took 30 shots a game. I'm sorry. You build teams for the playoffs. He shot 35%. What do you want? That happened.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, there's no argument with this. Dillon had a horrible playoffs, especially shooting-wise. He made a lot of bad decisions in the playoffs. But I think this is where you can see that Chris Vernon is scarred by this. And he even goes on to mention that it's going to take him a while to get over it. But he is scarred by this because Jaren Jackson shot 38% in the playoffs, and he's a freaking big. He shot 38% in the playoffs as a big. That is just as terrible as what Dillon shot. And that's not even adding on the compounding of Jaren fouling out so many games and not being available at the end of games. So I can understand Chris Vernon is still a little bit emotional about this. And that's kind of what I like about Chris Vernon. He is really and truly a Memphis Grizzlies fan. He doesn't just cover the team.
A lot of Grizzlies fans that aren't going to want to hear this. But there's a large contingent led by morons that have just tried to erase that from their memory like it did not happen. Like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know what they watch. They watch him act real tough like this on Steph Curry. And they're like, look at him. They think he's the glove. Like he played solid defense.
No, Chris Vernon, I think most Grizzly fans recognize Dillon had a horrible playoffs. We are just not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater and let that define him as a player and act like the rest of the things he's done on this team have not been pretty good. If we recall the last playoff series versus the Utah Jazz last season, he was phenomenal in the playoffs. So we didn't crown him a superstar after that, so we're not going to crown him a terrible player after a terrible postseason, because I've seen this in NBA history. A guy have a terrible postseason and everybody gets out on him, and it's just one postseason. It's just one postseason amongst a lot. So no, and his defense isn't fake. I mean, we all saw him bother Steph Curry last year during the play-in game, and this season, we have to admit, Dillon was out most of the season, and he wasn't in pristine shape, so his defense was off a little bit this year. But come on, his defense is not fake.
Look, there's nothing new under the sun. I went through this before.
Yeah.
I went through this with Rudy. This is just, he fakes you out. He trick y'all, as they say. He trick y'all. And I didn't like not showing up to media day. I didn't like it. And then having everybody cover for it. I didn't like it. I think that's weak, man. I don't like it. Sorry. Said what I said. That's how I feel about it, man. Like this, I watch those games. Pass the ball.
Pass the ball.
Like, team first. That's me. Team first. Team first. I'm the first to praise you. I'm the first to praise you. But I'll also be the first to criticize you if I think you're hurting the operation. And that entire playoffs, it hurt the operation.
Yeah.
It's a great team. They had a great season.
Now, this is where I really start to differ with Chris Vernon. Of course, the Grizzlies had a great season. They were a great team last year. But the notion that the attacks that he's making on Dillon Brooks are really unfair. And it's really unfortunate that he's not using his own criteria that he used to try to justify the Grizzlies being a good team this year on the national media stage as far as net rating, and we're going to get into that. But I just checked Cleaning the Glass, just to verify the net rating thing that I looked up earlier. And when I checked Cleaning the Glass, you can see that right here, you can see that Dillon Brooks was the second most impactful player in the playoffs as far as, the on-court, off-court efficiency. As you can see, Desmond Bane was insane in the playoffs. Dillon Brooks was second as far as differential. Steven Adams was third. Jaren Jackson was fourth. DeAnthony Melton was fifth. Ja Morant was sixth. Ja Morant is used to carry a lot of bad lineups, so that's why his differential is going to be bad. And he also missed the Warriors blowout game that the Grizzlies had when he was hurt. So, of course, it might be a little skewed by that Warriors playoff game, but even if I was saying, okay, maybe it's a little skewed by that, but then you go to the regular season and Cleaning the Glass, and Dillon Brooks is, regular season, Dillon Brooks is number 1 in efficiency rating, or not efficiency rating, but the efficiency differential as far as what the impact on the floor, off on the floor. Dillon Brooks is number 1. So I wanted to see, let's see how that holds up as far as net rating, because this is the criteria that Chris Vernon used in his, when he was doing national media about the Grizz. I think it was on Zach Lowe. I don't remember exactly which pod it was on, but he was on there. And we look at the regular season and the net rating, the differential between the offensive rating and defensive rating on off. Dillon Brooks is number 1, just like in Cleaning the Glass. He's number 1 in the regular season. So he is very, very, very impactful on the court despite shooting so poorly. And in the playoffs, we'll look again and see how does he stack up. And in the playoffs, he is third behind Desmond Bane and Steven Adams at 6.3, which is real good. So even despite his terrible shooting, terrible decision-making in the playoffs, he was still the third most impactful player as far as differential goes in the playoffs. Now, it's a small sample size. The playoffs are always a small sample size, but it's a small sample size for his shooting also. It's not how he shoots regularly. Now, his shot selection is questionable at all times, and I am not, even though I am a big Dillon Brooks fan, I am not one of those people that want to throw away Dillon Brooks for somebody like Jae Crowder, who's not going to bring something to the team that we don't already have, and that is a standstill shooter that can't create off the dribble and has, doesn't really offer anything exceptional defensively or as a rim protector or rebounding. So I am not opposed to Dillon Brooks. That's a tongue twister. But I would want somebody a little bit more dynamic than Jae Crowder if I'm Dillon Brooks. So we're going to end this pod or end this video listening to Chris Vernon detail how important he thinks net rating is and what it means as far as the players that have an impact on the court. Now make sure you give me your comments on whether you think this rant was appropriate Or do you think he went a little too far in his criticism of Dillon Brooks? And would you, as a Grizzlies fan, be in favor of Dillon Brooks for Jae Crowder and picks? Because remember, Chris Vernon did not say straight up. He is not saying that at all. So I don't want you guys to get that twisted. But Dillon Brooks for Jae Crowder plus picks or something else in a trade. Let me know what you think. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys tomorrow with the next video. Peace.
Your net rating is what actually happens when you're on the court. Not what we think, not what our opinion is. That's what actually happens.
Yes.
You win or lose when you are on the court. What's your number that is associated with you?
Yeah.
So per 100 possessions.
I know where you're going with this.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead. Good.
Is it the Ja, Bane, Dillon, Adams, Jaren together?
Nope.
Oh, okay, then go ahead then. I don't know where you're going with it.
No, but please.
No, I know. That's where I thought you were going with it.
See, that's why I'm Chris Vernon. You've been with me 16 years, bro. 16 years. If I was that predictable, now, your net rating is what your team does per 100 possessions, okay? Of the players returning for the Grizzlies this upcoming year, you go and look at last year's net ratings. Of the 9 top players for the Grizzlies last year, 8 of them returned to the team. The only one that does not is DeAnthony Melton, who was 7th on the team. The other 8 of the top 9 in net rating for the team all come back